A child lay dying under white surgical lights. 8 doctors surrounded him. Every machine in the room said the same thing. His heart had stopped. Dr. Gregor Sullivan removed his gloves and spoke without emotion.
Time of death, 9:58 p.m.
In the hallway, a billionaire father fell to his knees and screamed. The kind of scream that makes strangers look away. But outside, behind the hospital, a 15-year-old black boy sat alone in the rain, homeless, hungry, invisible to every person inside that building. He heard the flatline through a cracked door, and something inside him stirred. He reached for the worn leather pouch hanging around his neck.
That's not death. That's something else.
Then he stood up and walked inside. What did a homeless boy know that 8 doctors didn't? I'm not gonna lie, that moment just shifted everything. Let's get into the story. To understand what happened that night, you first need to understand the world Derek Harris lived in and the world that refused to let him exist. Whitfield Memorial Hospital sat in the heart of downtown Chicago like a cathedral built for the wealthy. Glass ceilings stretched 5 stories high. The lobby floor was Italian marble, polished so bright you could see your reflection. On the walls hung oil portraits of distinguished surgeons, decades of silver-haired white men in white coats framed in gold. Above the entrance, carved in brass, excellence beyond measure. This was where Chicago's richest came when their bodies failed them. CEOs, senators, the kind of people who believed enough zeros on a check could buy anything, including more time on this earth. Now walk around back. Behind that building, past the loading dock, there was an alley. No marble, no portraits, just dumpsters, steam vents, and the smell of wet cardboard. Between 2 rusted pipes sat a makeshift shelter. Flattened boxes, a torn plastic sheet, and a threadbare army jacket used as a blanket. This is where Derek Harris slept every single night. He was 15, thin but not frail. His skin was dark, his eyes darker, watchful, quiet, always cataloging. Around his neck, on a frayed cord, hung a small leather pouch, cracked, stained by years of rain. But he treated it like gold. He never took it off, not to sleep, not to eat, not ever. Every morning, he woke to ambulance sirens, the same sirens his mother once answered from the other side of that glass. He would sit by the loading dock, waiting for Rosa, a cafeteria worker with kind eyes, to slip him a sandwich. Every day she whispered the same thing. Your mama would be proud of you, baby. Derek's jaw would tighten. He never answered. He took the sandwich and walked away. But his fingers always gripped that leather pouch a little harder when she said it. What he did next every morning was something no one noticed. He walked to the recycling bin behind the medical library and pulled out discarded journals. The Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine. He read them cover to cover, sitting on concrete, sometimes stopping to smell the herbs inside his pouch, as if cross-referencing what he read with what he carried. When paramedics pulled up to unload patients, Derek would stand at a distance, watching. His lips moved, barely visible, murmuring diagnoses. A man clutching his left arm, anterior STEMI, aspirin and heparin before the cath lab. A woman with swollen ankles, right-sided heart failure, fluid overload. Almost always right, but no one was listening. No one ever looked twice at a black boy standing near a dumpster. Now let me tell you about the man who ran that hospital. Dr. Gregor Sullivan arrived every morning at 7:15 in a black town car. Italian shoes, monogrammed cuffs, silver hair swept back like a boardroom portrait. He walked through the lobby the way a king walks through his palace. Slow, deliberate, expecting every head to bow. He was chair of surgery, head of the ethics committee, and the final authority on every major case. When Sullivan spoke, no one dared question him. That morning, a young resident named Dr. Nina Castillo suggested a plant-based supplement for a post-operative patient. Sullivan stopped mid-stride and looked at her the way you look at a stain on your shoe. "This is a hospital, Dr. Castillo, not a farmer's market. If I wanted folklore, I'd read a children's book." The staff laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughing was safer than silence. Nina swallowed her words. The hierarchy was absolute. Then, at 8:47 p.m., everything changed. Elliot Bancroft arrived in a 3-car motorcade. His son Tobias, 8 years old, bright-eyed in every photo on his father's phone, was limp and gray on the stretcher. Collapsed at a private fundraiser, sudden respiratory failure, convulsions. The paramedics were sweating. Elliot was a man who had controlled every outcome in his life with money, but tonight his hands were shaking. He grabbed Sullivan by the lapels. "Save my son. I'll give you anything." Sullivan pried his hands away with ice-cold composure. "Mr. Bancroft, money doesn't perform surgery. I do. 3 men, 3 worlds. A billionaire who could buy anything except the one thing he needed. A surgeon who believed he answered to no one, and a 15-year-old black boy in the alley out back holding a pouch full of secrets no one in that building would have believed." The night was far from over. Sullivan took Tobias into surgery at 9:02 p.m. Behind the sealed doors of operating room 1, 8 specialists worked under blinding white lights while monitors beeped in uneven rhythms. The boy's vitals were collapsing, blood pressure dropping, oxygen saturation falling. Sullivan suspected a rare toxin-induced cardiac arrest, but every antidote protocol he ordered came back the same way. No response. One by one, the boy's organs began shutting down, like lights going off in a house where no one was coming home. 4 hours. 4 hours of every tool, every drug, every technique modern medicine could offer. And at the end of it, Sullivan stepped out of that operating room, pulled his mask below his chin, and spoke 6 words that ended a father's world. "There is nothing more we can do." Elliot Bancroft did not yell. He did not argue. He simply slid down the hallway wall until he was sitting on the cold floor. A billionaire reduced to a broken man in a $1,000 suit that could not save his son. His bodyguard stood helpless. His lawyers stood silent. The hospital chaplain was called. And somewhere in the chaos, a 15-year-old boy slipped through the cracked service door. Derek moved through the emergency wing like a shadow. He knew this building. He had memorized its layout from years of living behind it. Which doors stayed unlocked, which hallways were empty after shift changes, which corners the security cameras didn't reach. He made his way to the nurse's station, where a woman with gray-streaked hair and tired eyes was filling out paperwork. Her name tag read, Cora Whitfield, RN, 30 years service. Derek spoke quietly. "Ma'am, the boy they just brought out of surgery, he's not dead." Cora looked up. She saw a black teenager in a torn jacket, unwashed, standing in the middle of a sterile medical facility. Her first instinct was to call security, but then Derek said his name. "I'm Derek Harris." Cora's pen stopped moving. Her lips parted. "Harris?" She stared at him, really stared. "You're Lorraine's boy." Derek nodded. "The child's heart hasn't stopped. It's been slowed by a plant-based alkaloid. It mimics death, but the rhythm is still there, just below what your monitors can detect. There's a counter compound. I have it." He held up the leather pouch. For a moment, something shifted in Cora's eyes. She remembered Lorraine Harris. She remembered brilliance. She remembered what this hospital had done to that woman. She opened her mouth to respond. "What in God's name is this?" Sullivan's voice cut through the ward like a blade. He stood at the end of the corridor, still in his surgical scrubs, and what he saw made his face twist with disgust. A black boy, dirty, homeless, standing in his hospital, holding a bag of what looked like dried weeds, talking to his nurse as if he belonged here. Sullivan walked toward Derek with the slow, deliberate stride of a man who had never been challenged in his own building. "Who let this vagrant in here? This is a hospital, not a homeless shelter." Derek tried to speak. "Sir, The boy's heart, it's not cardiac arrest, it's, "You're going to lecture me?" Sullivan's voice rose. Every nurse in the corridor turned to watch. "I have 30 years of surgical experience. I trained at Johns Hopkins. And you smell like a dumpster." He looked at Derek's torn jacket, his dirty hands, the leather pouch around his neck. His lip curled. "What is that? Some kind of voodoo bag?" He turned to security. "Get him out, now." Two guards seized Derek by the arms. He struggled, not violently, but desperately, the way someone fights when they know a life depends on the next 30 seconds. "Please, just listen to me. The compound in his blood." But no one was listening. They were looking at his skin, his clothes, his shoes with holes in them. That was all the information they needed. As the guards dragged him toward the exit, the cord around his neck snapped. The leather pouch hit the marble floor and burst open. Dried herbs scattered across the polished white surface. Tiny brown leaves, crushed roots, fragments of bark. His mother's life work spread across the floor like garbage. Sullivan looked down at the herbs. He stepped forward, and slowly, deliberately, he placed his Italian leather shoe on top of them and ground them into the marble. "Clean this filth up." Derek watched from the guard's grip. Something in his eyes broke. Not his spirit, something deeper. The last thread of belief that this world might be fair. They threw him out the service entrance. He hit the wet concrete hard, palms first, skidding on the rain-slicked ground. The metal door slammed shut behind him. Through the small glass window, he could see the blurred shape of a white sheet being pulled over a small body. Sullivan turned to Cora, who stood frozen at the nurse's station. His voice was casual, almost amused. "The day I take medical advice from a homeless street kid is the day I turn in my license." Outside, in the alley, Derek sat in the rain. His hands were bleeding from the fall. He picked up the herbs that had spilled from his pouch, what little remained, gathering them one by one from the puddles, pressing each piece gently back into the leather. His fingers trembled. A memory rose up like a wave. His mother's face, Dr. Lorraine Harris, kneeling beside him when he was 4 years old, holding a leaf up to the light. "Smell this, baby. Feel the texture. The body knows its own medicine, Derek. You just have to listen." He remembered the day she didn't come home. The hospital board, led by a younger Sullivan, had revoked her privileges for unproven and dangerous methods. She lost her license, then her apartment, then her health. She died in a free clinic 6 months later, alone, discredited, with nothing left but a leather pouch of herbs and a 4-year-old son who didn't understand why his mother stopped breathing. Derek was placed in foster care, 3 homes in 2 years. Then he ran, back here, back to the alley behind the building where his mother once healed people, because it was the only place in the world that still felt like her. And now, inside that building, a child was dying because the doctors didn't know what Derek knew. And the man who destroyed his mother's career was the one standing in his way. Okay, wait, can we stop for a sec? This part messes me up every time. Imagine you're 15, literally holding the cure, and nobody lets you speak. Why? Because you're black. Because you're homeless. That's it. How many Dereks have we just walked right past? The rain kept falling. Derek pressed the pouch to his forehead, closed his eyes, and whispered his mother's words back to the dark. The body knows its own medicine. You just have to listen. He was not done, not even close. Derek didn't make it back to the alley. The 2 security guards dragged him through the ER lobby toward the front exit, the main entrance this time, not the service door. They wanted everyone to see. A black homeless boy being removed from a place he never should have entered. One guard gripped his wrist so hard the skin burned. The other muttered, "This ain't your world, kid." The lobby was packed. Families sat in plastic chairs, clutching paperwork. Nobody looked at Derek. He was just another problem being taken out with the trash. But then he heard it. A wet, choking gasp. Then a woman screaming, "Somebody help her! She can't breathe!" In the far corner, an elderly woman was gripping her armrest with both hands. Her face was swelling, her lips turning blue. Her throat is closing. Anaphylaxis, severe allergic reaction. Her daughter was shaking her shoulders, crying, looking around wildly for anyone. But every available staff member was upstairs dealing with the Bancroft crisis. The triage desk was empty. Derek stopped moving. The guards pulled at him. "Let's go, kid." But he wasn't listening anymore. He was listening to her breathing. The short, wheezing gasps. The wet rattle. He knew that sound. He knew she had less than 2 minutes. He twisted hard and broke free. Before either guard could react, he was running, not toward the exit, but toward the woman. He dropped to his knees beside her. His hands moved with a speed and precision that did not belong to a homeless boy. He opened the leather pouch, pulled out a small dried root, and crushed it between his palms with 3 sharp motions. He grabbed a cup of water from the nearby cooler, dropped the powder in, swirled it twice, and pressed the rim to her lips. "Drink this, small sips, don't fight it." The daughter screamed at him, "Get away from her!" But the old woman's hand came up and gripped Derek's wrist, not pushing away, holding on. She drank. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The swelling receded. The blue in her lips faded. Her chest expanded. One full breath, then another. Her eyes focused. She looked at Derek and whispered, "I can breathe." The entire waiting room went silent. 40 people had just watched a homeless black teenager do in 90 seconds what no one in that hospital had been available to do. No equipment, no IV, no drugs, just a dried root from a leather pouch and hands that knew exactly what they were doing. From across the lobby, Dr. Nina Castillo had seen everything. She was on her way to clock out, bag on her shoulder, keys in hand, but she had stopped mid-step and watched without blinking. Nina had studied ethnobotanical pharmacology in graduate school. What she just witnessed was not folk magic. It was the advanced application of a rare antihistamine compound that maybe 200 people on Earth knew how to prepare. She walked toward Derek. The security guards were closing in again. Nina held up her hospital badge and stopped them cold. "He's with me. Back off." She looked at Derek. "What did you just give her?" His voice was calm, precise. "Angelica root extract with wild ginger substrate. It neutralizes the histamine cascade within 90 seconds. Nina stared. "That's not in any textbook." "It's in my mother's." She pulled him aside, away from the guards, away from the staring crowd. She had heard the rumors about Dr. Lorraine Harris, a physician ahead of her time, erased by institutional politics. She asked about the Bancroft boy. Derek explained. The toxin mimics cardiac death by slowing the heart below detectable rhythm. A plant called ghost nettle. A counter compound his mother documented, the same compound he carried in his pouch. Nina's hands were shaking. She was a second-year resident. Defying Sullivan meant the end of her career. Bringing a homeless teenager into critical care meant being laughed out of the building. But she had just watched this boy save a woman's life with a crushed root and a cup of water. And upstairs, a child lay under a white sheet because the best doctors in Chicago didn't know what this 15-year-old knew. She looked at his eyes, certain, steady, burning with knowledge that had no degree attached to it. "Follow me, and don't say a word until I tell you to." What happened next would change everything, for Derek, for the boy upstairs, and for the man who thought his word was final. Nina led Derek through a back stairwell to the 3rd floor, critical care. She swiped her badge at every locked door without speaking, walking fast, keeping him close. If anyone stopped them, her career was over. She knew that. She did it anyway. The critical care ward was quiet in the worst way, the kind of quiet that follows death. Dim lights, soft machines humming on standby, And at the far end of the hall, behind a glass partition, a small body lay on a gurney under a white sheet. Elliot Bancroft sat beside his son. He had not moved. His hand rested on top of the sheet, on the spot where Tobias's chest would be. His eyes were red, empty, staring at nothing. 2 bodyguards stood behind him, useless. A chaplain sat in the corner with the Bible open on his lap, saying nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Nina brought Derek to the bedside monitor. The screen still displayed Tobias's last readings, flatline across every channel. Derek studied it in silence. His eyes moved across the data the way a pianist's fingers move across keys, fast, certain, reading a language that lives somewhere beneath the numbers. 30 seconds. That was all he needed. He pointed at one line on the toxicology panel. This compound. Your lab flagged it as unknown organic. It's a ghost nettle alkaloid. Molecular weight 342.4. Your system doesn't have it in its database because it's not a regulated substance. It's derived from a plant that grows in exactly 3 river valleys on Earth. 2 in Central Africa, 1 in southern Madagascar. Nina pulled out her tablet and cross-referenced. She searched the compound profile, the molecular weight, the plant origin. One result came back. A single obscure research paper from 2008, published in a journal so small it had been overlooked by every major medical database. The author? Dr. Lorraine Harris. Nina's hands trembled as she read the abstract. Everything Derek had said was there. The alkaloid structure, the cardiac mimicry, the counter compound. All of it. Documented, peer-reviewed, legitimate. She looked at Derek. He was 15 years old, standing in a hospital ward in a torn jacket, and he had just identified a toxin that an entire team of board-certified physicians had missed. Before either of them could speak, the door slammed open. Sullivan stood in the doorway. 2 security guards flanked him. His face was the color of raw meat. You again. His voice was low, shaking with controlled fury. I want this person arrested for trespassing. Now. Nina stepped between them. Her voice wavered, but she did not move. Dr. Sullivan, the toxicology panel shows an unidentified alkaloid. This young man has identified it. There is published research supporting his claim. Published by whom? Nina hesitated. 1 second. 2. She knew what would happen when she said the name. Dr. Lorraine Harris. The name landed in the room like a grenade. Sullivan's expression changed. A flash of recognition, then something harder. Something old and ugly that he had kept buried for 11 years. His jaw tightened. His eyes went to Derek, then back to Nina. Lorraine Harris was a fraud, he said. Each word was slow, deliberate, meant to cut. Her research was debunked. Her methods were dangerous. And her son, he looked at Derek with open contempt, is apparently carrying on the family tradition of medical quackery. Derek said nothing. He held Sullivan's gaze without flinching. 15 years old, standing in front of the most powerful man in the building, wearing shoes with holes in them, and he did not look away. But someone else in the room had been listening. Elliot Bancroft stood up, slowly, the way a man stands when something fundamental has shifted inside him. He looked at Sullivan. You told me my son is dead. Then he looked at Derek. You're telling me he's not. Derek's voice was steady. His heart is still beating, Mr. Bancroft, just so slowly your machines can't hear it. The alkaloid suppresses cardiac rhythm to a level below standard monitor detection. Give me 20 minutes. If I'm wrong, you've lost nothing. If I'm right, you get your son back. The room held its breath. Sullivan stepped forward. Mr. Bancroft, this is insanity. This is a homeless child with a bag of weeds. I am the chief of surgery at this hospital. I will not allow... Derek turned to Sullivan, and when he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every person in that room heard it clearly. You already pronounced him dead, Doctor. What are you afraid of? That I'll prove you wrong, or that my mother was right all along? Sullivan's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in 30 years, someone had looked him in the eye and made him flinch. And it was a 15-year-old black boy with no shoes, no degree, and nothing to lose. Elliot Bancroft made his decision. He turned to Sullivan with the cold precision of a man who had closed 1,000 deals and never once looked back. Let the boy try. Sullivan erupted. This is medical malpractice. I will have your hospital privileges revoked. I will have Dr. Castillo's license reviewed. I will... Elliot cut him off. You just told me my son is dead. You have no more authority here. Sullivan stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked out of the room. But he was not retreating. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone. He called the hospital's legal team. He called hospital security. He was going to have Derek removed by police. He was going to have Nina suspended. Whatever happened in that room, he would make sure it was buried, just like he had buried Lorraine Harris 11 years ago. But inside the critical care ward, something had already begun that could not be stopped. Nina locked the door. Derek opened his leather pouch, and Elliot Bancroft sat back down beside his son, placed his hand on the small chest, and whispered, "Hold on, buddy. Just hold on." The clock started. 20 minutes. While Derek worked inside the critical care ward, the truth began to spread through the hospital like fire through dry wood. It started with Nurse Cora Whitfield. Cora had stood silent at her station after Sullivan humiliated Derek. She had watched the guards drag him out. She had watched Sullivan grind those herbs into the marble floor. And she had said nothing, just like she had said nothing for 11 years. But something broke inside her when she saw that boy thrown into the rain, something she had kept locked in her chest since the day she watched this hospital destroy his mother. She gathered the ER staff in the break room, 6 nurses, 2 orderlies, a paramedic who had just come off shift. She closed the door, and for the first time in 11 years, Cora Whitfield told the truth. Dr. Lorraine Harris, she said, was the most gifted physician this hospital ever employed. And I mean ever. She combined traditional Western medicine with rare plant-based treatments that she spent years researching in the field. Africa, South America, Southeast Asia. Her patient survival rates were 30% higher than the department average. 30%. In a hospital this size, that's hundreds of lives. She paused. Her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. Sullivan was a rising surgeon back then, competing for the department chair. Lorraine's methods threatened him, not because they were wrong, but because they were better, and because she was a black woman who didn't bow her head when he walked past. He couldn't stand it. So he led the ethics review. He manipulated case files. He pressured colleagues to testify against her. He made sure she was erased. Cora looked at every face in that room. She didn't lose her license because she was wrong. She lost it because she was better than him. And she was a black woman who didn't know her place. The room was silent. One of the younger nurses had tears running down her cheeks. The paramedics stared at the floor. They had all heard whispers about Lorraine Harris over the years, fragments, rumors, half-truths. But no one had ever said it out loud. No one had ever dared, until now. The story moved through Whitfield Memorial in minutes, floor to floor, ward to ward, whispered at nurses' stations, murmured in elevators, texted between staff members who had never once questioned Sullivan's authority. By the time 10 minutes had passed, every person in that building knew. Derek Harris was not a random homeless boy with a bag of weeds. He was the son of Dr. Lorraine Harris, the physician this institution had destroyed. He had grown up on the streets, memorizing his mother's research, because it was the only inheritance she had left him. Every herb in that leather pouch had been hand-selected from her formulas. Every label was written in her handwriting. He had carried her life's work around his neck for 11 years, through foster homes and rain-soaked alleys, waiting, without knowing it, for the moment when someone would finally need what she had taught him. And that moment was now. Inside the critical care ward, Nina had pulled up Lorraine's full publication history on her tablet. What she found made her hands go cold. Dozens of papers on plant-based cardiac intervention, toxin reversal, emergency botanical pharmacology, published in small but legitimate journals, peer-reviewed, methodologically rigorous. Not one had been formally retracted or debunked. They had simply been buried, uncited, ignored, suppressed by an institution that found it easier to erase a black woman than to admit she had been right. Nina turned the tablet toward Elliot Bancroft. He read in silence. Then he looked at Derek, really looked at him, perhaps for the first time. Not at the torn jacket, not at the dirty hands, at the boy himself. "Your mother worked here?" Derek's voice was steady, but his eyes, for the first time that night, betrayed the pain underneath. "She gave her life to this place. They took everything from her. Her work, her name, her health, and now they need what she taught me." Elliot Bancroft said nothing for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly, once. The nod of a man who finally understood that the most valuable person in this building was the one everyone had thrown away. But understanding wouldn't be enough, because Sullivan was already on his way back, and this time he wasn't coming alone. Nina locked the critical care ward door from inside. She pulled the blinds down over the glass partition. Then she turned to Derek and said the only thing left to say. "Do what you need to do." Derek stood beside Tobias Bancroft's body. The white sheet had been pulled back. The boy looked like he was sleeping, except for the color. That terrible gray. The stillness that was too still. The monitors above him displayed flat green lines across every channel. No pulse, no oxygen, no electrical activity. By every measure modern medicine could offer, this child was dead. Derek opened the leather pouch. He did it slowly, carefully, the way a priest opens a sacred text. His fingers, calloused and scarred from years on the street, moved inside the pouch with absolute precision, selecting by touch what his eyes already knew. He pulled out 3 dried specimens and laid them on a sterile tray Nina had placed beside the gurney. "I need a ceramic mortar," he said, "and 60 milliliters of saline, exactly 60. Nina brought both from the pharmacy cart. She did not question him. She watched. Derek crushed the first herb, a dark, gnarled root with 3 firm rotations. "Black cohosh root," he said aloud, so Nina could document. "It stimulates the vagus nerve, forces the parasympathetic system to wake up." He added the second, a cluster of small yellow flowers, dried and brittle. "Arnica montana. It reverses the alkaloid binding at the receptor level, frees the heart muscle." Then he reached into the pouch one last time and pulled out something different. A single leaf, so thin it was almost translucent, pale green with veins like thread. He held it up to the light and paused, just for a moment, as if saying goodbye to something. "Spectral fern," he said quietly. "It only grows in 3 river valleys in Central Africa. My mother spent 6 years finding a sustainable source." He looked at the leaf. "This is the last of her supply." He placed it in the mortar, crushed it, added the saline. The mixture turned a deep amber, rich, dark, catching the overhead surgical light like liquid copper. The smell filled the room, earthy, sharp, ancient, a smell that did not belong in a modern hospital, a smell that belonged to jungles, to riverbanks, to a knowledge system older than any medical school on Earth. Derek dipped his fingers into the compound. Then, with a precision that made Nina hold her breath, he began applying it to Tobias's body. Over the heart, along the vagus nerve pathway on the left side of the neck, at the base of the skull. His hands moved like a surgeon's. No, like something more than a surgeon's. Like hands that had been trained not by textbooks, but by touch, by instinct, by a mother who had poured everything she knew into a child who was the only person left to carry it. Elliot Bancroft watched from behind the glass, both palms pressed flat against it. His breath fogged the surface. He did not blink. Then the door exploded open. Sullivan was back, and he had brought reinforcements. 2 hospital security guards, 2 Chicago police officers, and a printed cease and desist order from the hospital's legal counsel. His face was flushed, triumphant, vicious. "Step away from that body," Sullivan commanded. "This boy is to be arrested for trespassing and practicing medicine without a license. Officers, remove him, now." The police stepped forward. One reached for his handcuffs. Derek did not flinch. His hands did not stop. He was still applying the compound, still working, still counting something under his breath, a rhythm, a timing, something only he understood. Elliot Bancroft moved. He stood up from behind the glass, walked into the room, and positioned his body directly between Derek and the police. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried the weight of a man who had destroyed companies, ended careers, and never once lost a negotiation. "Anyone who touches that boy before he finishes will face every lawyer my money can buy. And I promise you, every single one of you will wish you had walked away tonight." The police hesitated. They looked at Sullivan. They looked at Bancroft. 2 kinds of power, standing face to face. Sullivan's face contorted. "This man is not a doctor. He is a homeless child performing witchcraft on a dead body. I demand—" "You demand nothing," Elliot said. "You told me my son is dead. Your authority ended the moment those words left your mouth." Sullivan stood frozen, trembling with rage. But he did not move forward. The police did not move forward. No one moved. Inside the room, Derek finished applying the compound. He wiped his hands on the sheet. Then he placed one palm flat on Tobias's chest, directly over the heart, and closed his eyes. The clock on the wall read 14 minutes since he had begun. Sullivan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, smirking. "Your folk remedy isn't working. Look at the monitors. Flatline. This is over." Minute 15. Nothing. The green line stayed flat. The room was silent, except for the hum of machines that had nothing to report. Minute 16. Nina watched Derek's face. His eyes were closed. His lips were moving, barely. A prayer? A count? She couldn't tell. His hand had not moved from Tobias's chest. Minute 17. Derek opened his eyes. One word. Listen. Nina grabbed a stethoscope from the tray. She leaned over Tobias's chest and pressed the bell to his skin. She heard nothing. Silence. The flat, mechanical silence of a body that had stopped. Then, a beat. Faint. Impossibly slow. Like a single knock on a door from very far away. But present. Real. Nina's eyes went wide. Her voice cracked. "Oh my God." Minute 18. The beat came again, stronger. Then again. The heart monitor, still set to flatline mode, began to flicker. A tiny spike appeared on the green line, then another. A rhythm was forming, irregular, tentative, like a bird testing its wings after a long fall. Beep, beep, beep. Minute 19. Tobias's chest rose. One breath, shallow, fragile, but unmistakable. Then another. The gray in his skin began to recede, slowly at first, then faster, like color returning to a photograph left in the sun. His lips flushed from blue to pink. His fingers twitched. His eyelids trembled. Every person in that room stopped breathing. Minute 20. Tobias Bancroft opened his eyes. He looked up at the faces above him. Strangers, machines, bright lights, confusion, fear. Then his gaze drifted to the glass partition, where a man was pressing both hands against the surface with tears streaming down his face. "Daddy?" One word. One small, confused, beautiful word. Elliot Bancroft shattered. He burst through the door, fell to his knees beside the gurney, and took his son's face in both hands. He wept, openly, without shame, without control. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep it has no name. The place where a father keeps the worst fear he has ever known, now flooding out of him because the fear is over. His boy was alive. The heart monitor beeped, steady now, strong. The sound filled the silent ward like music. Every nurse, every doctor, every security guard, every police officer, they stood frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. Derek stepped back from the gurney. His hands were trembling, not from exhaustion, from something else, the weight of what had just passed through them. He closed the leather pouch gently and let it hang against his chest. Then the room turned to Sullivan. He stood in the doorway, the man who had pronounced the boy dead, the man who had dragged Derek out by his arms, the man who had ground his mother's herbs into the floor, the man who had destroyed Lorraine Harris and slept well for 11 years afterward. His face was the color of ash. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He turned, and he walked away, down the corridor, each step slower than the last. The sound of his Italian leather shoes echoed against the tile. Tap, 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 growing fainter, growing smaller, while behind him, the heart monitor beeped on and on and on. The aftermath was immediate and seismic. Tobias was moved to the pediatric recovery ward within the hour. His vitals stabilized steadily, heart rate normalizing, oxygen climbing, blood pressure returning to baseline. A team of pediatric specialists ran every test available and confirmed what Derek had said from the beginning. The boy's heart had entered a toxin-induced, ultra-low rhythm state, so slow that standard hospital monitoring equipment could not detect it. He had never been dead. He had been trapped between life and death by a compound that no one in that building had been trained to recognize. No one except a 15-year-old boy who slept behind a dumpster. Nina and 3 independent pharmacologists tested the residue of Derek's compound that same night. The chemistry was sound. The mechanism of action, vagus nerve stimulation combined with receptor-level alkaloid reversal, was consistent with Dr. Lorraine Harris's published research. Every element held up. One of the pharmacologists, a tenured professor from Northwestern School of Medicine, reviewed the data twice before speaking. He called it one of the most elegant toxicological interventions I have ever analyzed in 30 years of practice. The word elegant, used to describe the work of a homeless boy mixing herbs on a hospital tray. That single word carried more weight than Sullivan's entire career. At 2:14 a.m., in a quiet hallway outside the recovery ward, Elliot Bancroft found Derek sitting on the floor with his back against the wall. The leather pouch rested in his lap. His eyes were closed. He looked, for the first time that night, like what he was, a tired child. Elliot sat down beside him, not standing over him, not looking down, beside him. He extended his hand. Derek opened his eyes and took it. It was not the handshake of a rich man thanking a poor one. It was the grip of a father holding the hand that had pulled his son back from the dead. Anything, Elliot said. His voice broke on the word. Anything you need for the rest of your life. Derek was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. I don't need anything for myself, but my mother's work needs a home. That single sentence would change everything that came next. Elliot Bancroft kept his word. Within 72 hours, his legal team filed the paperwork to establish the Lorraine Harris Institute for Botanical Medicine, housed in a brand new wing of Whitfield Memorial Hospital. The same hospital that had erased her name 11 years ago would now carry it on its front wall in brass letters 3 feet tall. A photograph was mounted at the entrance of the institute, not a portrait painted by a commissioned artist, not a stock image from a university archive. It was a small, creased photograph that Derek had carried in the inside pocket of his torn army jacket since he was 4 years old. His mother, young and smiling, wearing her white coat, standing in front of the hospital on her first day. Derek handed it over himself. He held it for a long moment before letting go. Then he nodded and walked away. Lorraine Harris's suppressed research was republished. Every buried paper, the cardiac interventions, the toxin reversal protocols, the botanical pharmacology studies, was peer-reviewed again by independent teams across 3 universities. Every single one held up. Within months, medical schools in Chicago, Boston, and Atlanta began incorporating her work into their curricula. The woman they had called a fraud was now being taught to the next generation of doctors. Derek was granted a full scholarship to one of Chicago's most prestigious preparatory academies, with a guaranteed pathway to Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine upon graduation. On his first day of school, he walked through the iron gates wearing new clothes that still felt unfamiliar on his skin. His backpack was clean. His shoes had no holes. But inside that backpack, tucked carefully between textbooks, was the leather pouch. The herbs inside now had proper pharmaceutical labels, his mother's handwriting on one side, his own on the other. 2 generations of knowledge side by side. He was 15 years old, and his life had finally begun. Nina Castillo was promoted to lead researcher at the Harris Institute. The woman Sullivan had mocked for suggesting plant-based medicine was now running an entire department dedicated to it. Nurse Cora Whitfield retired with honors, her 30-year silence finally broken, her conscience finally clear. And Rosa, the cafeteria worker who had slipped Derek a sandwich every morning and whispered, "Your mama will be proud," was given a permanent front desk position at the Institute. Derek's personal request, his first request, in fact, before the scholarship, before the new clothes, before anything else. Now, Sullivan. An internal investigation triggered by Cora's testimony and backed by Elliot Bancroft's legal team tore open 11 years of rot. Falsified ethics reviews, suppressed research data, manipulated case files, a systematic culture of intimidation that had silenced every voice brave enough to question his authority. The hospital board held an emergency session and stripped Sullivan of his chairmanship. The state medical board opened a formal inquiry into his license. 3 former colleagues came forward with testimony they had been too afraid to give for over a decade. On a Tuesday morning, Dr. Gregor Sullivan was seen leaving Whitfield Memorial Hospital for the last time. He did not leave through the glass atrium lobby. He did not leave in a black town car. He walked out through the service entrance, the same metal door through which his security guards had thrown a 15-year-old boy into the rain just days before. He carried a single cardboard box of personal effects. No entourage, no Italian shoes. He wore plain brown loafers that squeaked against the wet concrete. He stepped into the alley, looked around at the dumpsters and the steam vents and the place where Derek's cardboard shelter had once been, and he kept walking. No one followed him. No one called after him. No one cared. The alley had a new visitor now, and the alley did not care about titles. 3 weeks later, Derek Harris stood behind a podium at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. He had been invited by the pharmacology department, not as a curiosity, not as a charity case, but as a guest speaker. The lecture hall was full. 200 medical students looked down at him from tiered seats. He was still thin, still quiet. His hands, resting on the podium's edge, still carried the scars of concrete and rain. The leather pouch sat beside the microphone, and when he spoke, his voice filled that room with the steady authority of someone who had learned medicine not from a classroom, but from a mother's hands, a recycling bin full of journals, and 1,000 nights spent alone with knowledge that no one wanted to hear. He was 15, and he already knew more than half the people in that room. The world measures worth in diplomas, in addresses, in the clothes on your back, but knowledge doesn't care about your zip code. Talent doesn't check your bank account, and healing, real healing, doesn't come from a building. It comes from the hands that were brave enough to reach out when everyone else pulled away. Derek Harris didn't save Tobias Bancroft because he had a degree. He saved him because he had something no institution could give him and no institution could take away. His mother's knowledge, carried in a leather pouch, kept alive by love. Real talk, this story wrecked me. A 15-year-old black kid, brilliant beyond belief, and the world just looked right through him because of his skin, because he was homeless. That's it. Talent like that doesn't die, y'all. We just gotta stop pretending it's not there.